Hi, I'm Maya Sorelia, and I'm here today with Ciara, my cover artist, who did the cover of Hunting the Empress. She will also be doing the cover of book 2, which I can't wait for you guys to see that. It is amazing. But anyway, we're going to be talking about, and I'm going to be asking her all kinds of questions about what it takes to her artist background, what it takes to be an artist these days, etc., etc. So, without further ado, say hello, Ciara.
Hello,
And
everybody.
we're gonna get right into this. So, first question is: when did you first become interested in drawing or illustration, and what sparked your interest?
I've been drawing my whole entire life for the most part, but it, I didn't, the idea that art could be like a career, it's something that people did. Obviously I knew because I was always looking at different images and stuff, but it didn't really stick in my brain that it was something that I could maybe do as well until probably like 2008 is probably when it started, but like 2009, 2010, because that was the time frame where I started getting into anime. I always liked animated shows, watched them as a kid, the classics like Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Powerpuff Girls. But then I was aware that anime was a thing, but it wasn't until that year that I actually had more easy access to just start watching it myself. And then that sort of sparked my interest in trying to draw it, because when I attempted it at the time, because I was actively drawing a lot of fantasy related things, especially from like based around artists that I liked. But then when I attempted to draw that, like the anime style, it was so bad that I was like, how do you do this?
Like, start somewhere though.
It was so bad because I didn't understand. It highlighted things that I wasn't aware of when it came to really drawing. Was like, oh, composition, proportions. Like I was trying to do those things up until that point, but it wasn't until that moment when I could see how bad it was that I was like, oh wow, that does not look right. Doesn't remotely look like the reference that I was using. What am I doing wrong? And that sort of put me into a rabbit hole of like, okay, how do you actually do this? And looking at tutorials, and it just kind of snowballed from there.
That's what you got to do though when you're learning. You have to start somewhere. I think people give up and they get so frustrated because they're not like perfect at it right away. But that's just not reality, folks. You got to practice, you got to keep going, and don't quit.
I think also, especially nowadays, because I've seen it happen recently, like internet wise, where certain people who have no drawing background really, or maybe a little bit, have like made a point of like, I'm gonna learn to draw in like 100 days, and then they did it. And other people in the artist community got upset about it because it was like they didn't believe that they actually progressed that much, but it was because they were doing it every day.
Yeah, it's practice.
Like again, that's something you have to do, is like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever time you have. If you just set that aside to just do it, you will improve, but it takes time.
Exactly. So, question number 2. Tell us about where you went to school and what you majored in.
So my schooling, just background in general, has had some unconventional aspects to it, because I was mostly homeschooled, and then I did all of my high school program online. So because of that, I decided, okay, I'm going to get all my general GERs at the time. That's what they were using the system at a community college, and then that's when I started, okay, where am I going to go and transfer into? So luckily, the school that I was going to at the time had like a co-enrollment thing where if you had the right GPA and the right number of credits, you could do dual enrolling, where you could take a couple classes at the college that I was considering.
It's so cool.
And so I did that, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely doing this school. So I ended up going to William Mary, which is a liberal arts college. So there's, disciplines from all other fields, sciences, psychology. They had computer science, they had kinesiology, all of that stuff.
Wait until book 2. You'll hear a little bit about that in there.
It's a beautiful campus, especially if we actually had snow at any point. It was like kind of Hogwarts-like in some aspects.
Very.
Lots of old history, but they did have a arts program. Arts and art history was the official word for it. So I did art and art history with a concentration in studio art, because you could do either concentration in studio art or a concentration in art history. And you got a little bit of both those practices in there. So I focused in 2D, but you had to do a little bit of 3D. I ended up, so when I first transferred in, there was a student there who was, my senior in the art department, and it is a very small art department at William Mary, but they have some very good professors. And so I was talking to him, and he was like, yeah, I can't even take any more art classes because I've maxed out the credits that I can take in. And I was like, I want to do that. And I ended up doing exactly that. So I did wheel throwing, I did hand building for ceramics, but I mainly did a lot of printmaking, a lot of life drawing, and a little bit of oil painting. But most of my senior exhibition was primarily prints, with a few paintings and actually some photography, because I did do some 5x7, I think we're 4x6, I don't know, it was a very odd shape of camera that we got to use for developing film and stuff. It was a lot of fun, though.
Yeah. I mean, William and Mary is an absolutely beautiful school, and where the art students get to work is insane. I mean, it's really beautiful.
So you have like two main buildings that you'd be working in. There was the main arts building along with the theater. So the theater kids were on the other side of the building. And so that's where a lot of times you would maybe have some art history classes happening there. And like the painting studio was there, but then the other studio was tucked away in the woods where the printmaking studio was, and also where the professors' private studios were. And it was great because you have the view of like the lake and the trees. You're kind of tucked up in, like kind of up in the trees a little bit with the way the studio is
If you're
built.
an artist or a creative, I'm telling you, the space is, mwah, it's beautiful. Okay, so question number 3. Who are your favorite artists, and do you have any muses?
So, as a kid, some of my favorite artists that I was looking at the time were people like Amy Brown, Stephanie Law, who's still a super favorite of mine. I have a couple of her art books over here. She's mainly a watercolor artist. And so I've always really loved the watercolor style. So a lot of artists who did that were something I was always attracted to, but also like artists when I was a kid, was like David Delmar, who did a lot of the mermaids, a lot of really classic fantasy artwork. But then when I got to college age, some of my main muses at that time were definitely, and still are, is like, let's see. Durer, yes. So Durer, if you're a printmaker, Durer was always like a big one that you would look at and just be mind boggled by. Even from an extremely young age, he was a master at what he was doing. Why am I blanking on the name for Saturn eating his children? Goya, there we go. That was like a big one, because I especially liked some of that, like again, the Saturn eating his children was a piece that really stuck with me in my mind. And kind of the weird surrealist artists were also like, have always been a bit of my
You can see his
inspo.
frustration and his anger. I mean, because he did not like who he was working for
which is-
at all. So you could see it like really coming out in his art and his expression.
Oh yeah, and that's not uncommon with a lot of the artists at the time. Because another one I loved was obviously Leonardo da Vinci. His work, I got to see it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. But it was funny at the time, because that was actually right before I started my time at the college. They had on the campus, there was actually an art museum, and so the curator of that museum actually got from like over in Florence and stuff, them to bring Leonardo da Vinci's work as well as Michelangelo.
It was really cool.
At the time, I was not really a fan of Michelangelo. And I was just like really focused on the Da Vinci stuff, which I kind of regret now, because later on in my time at college, I had to do a paper about the Sistine Chapel. And so I learned a lot about Michelangelo.
He's awesome.
And yeah, I very much respect him now, because especially knowing how much drama he went through to do the Sistine Chapel, because he did not want to do that. He was forced by the Pope at the time to do it. It was a whole drama. So that's the great thing about art history and learning about it, is that you learn so much more dirt about the time than you would any other way.
Exactly. That's like, I went to art school as well, and it just the things that your mind is opened up to, like things you would never consider before. You might even have an opinion or like a bias towards specific artists, or think or whatever. But then when you actually get to learn about their background, who they actually were as people, the stuff that they endured and stuff, it's just so eye-opening, and really it's fun. you know, like Fragonard, like learning about all the dirt on that. Now, you talk about dirt. That's literally what his art is. It's the gossip column of the time.
And that's what Goya did a lot too. Because
Yeah.
again, Goya was, I mean, a lot of people always think about Goya and they think probably, they'll think about his oil paintings and stuff, but he was also a printmaker. And printmaking at the time was the best way to talk
Spread
dirt.
the word. Yep.
To talk dirt.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So, question number 4 is, who or what inspires your work the most?
So generally, my inspiration for a lot of my work is influenced greatly by fantasy themes, mythology, I guess you could say spiritualism in general. Obviously, other artists that I look at help to inspire a lot of my work. Sometimes I get inspiration from dreams. Also, the biggest one is just the natural world, because I do like to explore animals, plants, and so especially within the last few years, that has become a bigger portion of working into my work, is that, and also like landscapes and environments more. I've grown a lot in that way, where it was always very character based what I would draw, but it's greatly expanded from there. Part of it was, you know, going to art college, you know, studying, learning more about that, and just being introduced to other ideas helps to expand that. But I've always loved nature and animals, so it was bound to come back into my work at some point.
Yeah, nature really inspires me as well. So, number 5, how would you describe your particular art style?
So obviously my art style has gone through a couple different phases, I feel like, because so back when I first really started drawing, it was, again, influenced by those artists like Amy Brown, Stephanie Law, so like these really, you know, fairies, mermaids, all that kind of stuff. So that's where that started. And then I got into anime, so that greatly changed my art style at that time, because again, it took on more of the qualities of anime, more bigger eyes. And that's, again, a big part of how I started to learn to draw better, was using that as a basis. And then once I got into college, started doing... Well, yes, and, you know, for the most part, I know that a lot of people, when we talk about going to college, especially if you want to be an artist and you have, like, a love for something like animated sphere of anything, there is a lot of dirt that's talked about those styles of artwork, especially in the more traditional fine arts world, which... you know, whatever. Exactly. So luckily, the professors I had, even though, again, I would say that the art education that I got in college was very based in the classics.
Yes.
So, but they were not discouraging about it. I will say, you know, if something felt odd and I tried to invent something and put in there, my professors would call me out to be like, hey, you know, try to either maybe rethink that. Again, they were very encouraging in that way. Or, you know, you need to base it on something you can actually physically see to help, you know, make it correct, which was great advice. Drawing from life is a huge, huge benefit. And so
Major.
That's where I started really improving with my proportions and, you know, just learning how to, getting that classics background really helped to influence and make when I wanted to do the fun, you know, kooky drawings, animated kind of like style, it would make it better. So they can both feed and influence each other. I feel like those in the more fine art worlds, and I feel like it is changing a little bit, need to be more open to that. I mean, for example, like one of my other favorite artists is James Jean, who is very surrealist and pop surrealist in particular. I love pop surrealism.
That's kind of like popular. I know with Gen X people.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
We really like that. Okay.
Yes.
And people are decorating their homes like that. Even.
I would love for a really traditional fine artist gallery person to try to talk smack about James Jean's work, because it is amazing. He's also a printmaker. Again, I love the printmaking background. It's so fun. But yeah, so from that, you know, that changed my style again. So now I would say my style is still, you can still see a bit of that anime influence, because also
a little bit.
Art Nouveau is another time period that I'm really heavily inspired by. So,
Yes.
and part of like, it's very naturalistic, has natural like elements to it, because they were very much about nature in that time frame. And especially
line and contour with Art Nouveau.
that's another thing, especially when you look at my work, you see still a lot of that line and contour.
Oh, yeah, you can see it like in Ray and what's going on here, and then in the background and stuff. That's something like when I was going to school that was like the main thing for the design is like you had to do line and contour because that's the most important part of that. But you still studied everything else too. But
there's a time and place for different things. And again, even in like recent time, I'm starting to try to work a little bit more with like pushing, because sometimes I feel like I can fall back on using the line and contour as sort of like it's my comfort zone. So trying to learn how to push out of that and try to do a little bit of some other things with that. But I don't know, it's very illustrative. I would say my style is obviously. It is starting to push a little bit in some aspects, a little bit more towards like a semi-realism, but even not quite.
I love that though.
It's somewhere in between there. I think it will always have a little bit of that anime flavor into whatever I do. And also just depending on my mood in the day, sometimes I'll do weirder styles with my characters that are more anime or more like, I guess like a weird kind of cartoony. It just depends on my mood or what the task is that I'm trying to go for with a piece.
Okay. So, number 6, what is the most challenging thing about being an artist?
So, there's a lot of aspects to the challenge. So I guess you could break it into 2 different camps. There's just actually physically doing the creative part where there's challenges. There's also just existing as an artist in the sphere of society and pressures from that aspect. So within just the creative sphere, obviously there's things like burnout when you push yourself, especially when it comes to, okay, are you doing your art as a means of career? What extent of that are you using as a career? And still trying to keep the balance between, I love this, it's my favorite thing to do, but I need to make sure that I don't lose that love because I'm forcing it to be a job. I feel like that's a thin line that a lot of people have to balance when they're trying to make this a career or a side hustle, whatever it might be. If it's anywhere outside the sphere of just like, I just do this for fun. But even when you just do it for fun and you're posting it online, you can start to get pressure from that side of things. Yep. I feel like, again, when we're talking about outside society, there's the stereotypes of the starving artists, not being valued by other spheres of learning, people thinking you're essentially a joke because you decide to do a creative sphere of like work, whether it's visual art, if it's writing, like there's every creative outlet has some sort of criticism that usually is coming from the more scientific side of the communities where, again, they may not value it as much as
straight up the jealous side.
Or that too. And it happens within the fields themselves. So, you see it with, again, when we talk about the, fine arts world where it's like they look their nose down at the animators or somebody who does something more like physical crafts, like woodworking, that's not always valued the same as an oil painting, which is ridiculous.
I understand how they could look their nose down at animators, especially if you go old school, like to the animation, like things like Snow White. Like that was like one of the first like animations that was like major color, like, and that was all done by hand, folks. Everything about it. That is like blows my mind. When you look at that, like the old school, like what is it?
Disney.
The harmony. What are they called?
Harmony Symphony or
the symphony, silly symphonies, and stuff like that. Like the skeleton dance. Like that. Everyone loves that cartoon. Stuff like that. Going way back. That's all done by hand. That takes hours and it's backbreaking work, your eyes are strained,
we can, again, because I have knowledge in the anime sphere, if we want to talk bad work conditions in certain ways, a really big a studio right now that are pumping out amazing work, like amazing animation that is blowing everybody's mind out, but they have some real issues within the studio with the work conditions for the workers and
it's like they
how
treat
much
it
they
like
work.
Subhuman or something.
Yeah, it's been
not
bad,
right.
But the work they do it's so sad because the work they do is absolutely amazing in like the anime sphere, especially of like recent time stuff. And again, that's not necessarily a new story. That's been happening for a really long time. That's why you
That's
have
happening with a lot of different industries. I mean, I know in fashion industry, it's like, don't even get me started.
Oh, that's why you have things like the animators union and stuff like that. So then, they can, advocate for themselves. And we have that a lot here. Again, I'm assuming they also have a version of that in Japan somewhere, but it just depends on the situation. But
okay, so this leads into this kind of a little bit here for question number 7. How do you overcome creative blocks?
So
this is fun for everyone, y'all.
Yeah. And again, it's like, I believe that everybody is creative. Everybody can connect to some sort of creativity, even if you think you're not a creative person.
Accountants can be creative folks.
Exactly. Whether you can find creative problem solving within your accounting business, or maybe you have a hobby outside of that. Everybody should have a creative outlet. So when it comes to creative blocks, so especially let's say you are an artist, this is what you regularly do. You do it as, your work or maybe whatever. It's like, and you hit those blocks. Some things that I find helpful is just getting away from it.
Yep.
Go and take a break. Go and experience something else that's not related to that. Go for a walk. Maybe go see a new movie. Like, just go do the dishes. Like anything. You can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had random ideas come out when I'm
cleaning,
doing the dishes. I'm in the shower, or I'm driving in the car or something. Yep. It's like, those are usually when you're not actively doing it, you get the ideas.
What about, I don't know if you've done this, but I know other people out there feel this too. In the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden you get this brilliant idea and you're like really warm in bed and you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to sit there and turn on the light because maybe your partner is sleeping. You don't want to disturb them. That drives me crazy.
Well, unfortunately, to have your phone close by, because you could just like jot down a note or something on your phone.
I've done that on my iPad a couple times, but yeah.
Some other things that I think are helpful, especially again in the artist sphere of things. So having a sketchbook that, so I have different sketchbooks that I do different things in. Sometimes I have the more aesthetic ones that are like, oh, I can post this or whatever. But then I also have ones that are usually cheaper paper that I do most of the actual work in, where it's like thumbnailing ideas, and I mean, they're shit. They're like shit sketches, okay? But that is healthy, because it's like whenever I have a random idea, I can use that as a place just to doodle and play, where it's like I don't have to worry about it needing to be perfect or something like that, which I feel like is a part of where you start getting blocks. Also, you get creative blocks if you're burnt out because you've been doing it too much.
Vacation.
So you need to take a break.
Yes.
I think part of a way to stay away from creative block is, again, having either a notes, like it could be on your phone, it could be a sketchbook, doesn't matter what time of day it is. If you have a random idea, just jot it down, because when you do hit those blocks, it's like, especially if it's like a situation where I don't know what to draw, I can't come up with any new ideas, you go back in those and you can find those ideas you had a while back, and then you can work on them. The other thing, again, there's so many different types of creative block. So that's more of like an ideas one, where it's like, I can't have an idea. If it's more of like, I feel like my drawings, like my physical drawing sucks right now, it's like usually stepping away. There's one of two things: either step away from it for a little bit and then come back and try it, or just keep trying to do it. I know that sounds silly. Like I was trying to draw in one of my little sketchbooks just recently, like this, a garden eel. It's a type of fish. And the first one I started drawing, super ugly. I did not like it. So I erased it. And then I tried again with a different reference, because that might also help. Maybe that reference just isn't clicking for you right now. Try a different reference. That's another thing. A lot of people want to try to say, oh, you're not a real artist. Some people try to say this. You're not a real artist if you use reference. You have to do it all for your imagination. That's a lie. That is the weirdest.
Who the hell says that?
I have heard it, and it is the weirdest thing. It's like, you can't draw good from your imagination if you haven't studied real life stuff. Like, it's not going to be as good as it can be.
Some people just don't know what they're talking about, I guess.
But yeah, again, experimenting and just keep trying to draw the thing and not separate the idea, oh, it needs to be perfect. Like that's a big thing with the mechanical side of it. Another good thing that I find for getting out of a slump or a block is taking an older piece and reworking it, like redrawing it. I think that's a really fun exercise. It's also a great exercise to see how far you've come in your skill, especially if it's a creative block based on, I'm a horrible artist. Like that idea is stuck in your head. Like, I suck. I can't do anything. redraw something that's much, much older. And then you realize, oh, wow, I'm not as bad as I thought I was. Like, especially if you're hitting a skill level block, I would say. Because, again, I think there's the subject of how to get out of a creative block really is more complicated than I think most people say, because it depends on what exactly is the thing blocking you. You have to be able to, subjectively identify what it is that's causing the problem first, and that will tell you how to solve it.
So when I was in school, they told us, this is something that, like, they basically said this needs to be part of your routine, is that you need to take breaks and walk away and go out on the town, people watch, and just go to places you've never been before.
Yes.
And you do, because it does give inspiration, especially if you're a designer of any kind, to go experience new cultures, new places, things like this, and immerse yourself in that. And just forget about all the work and everything that you have to do, and just chill the F out and just enjoy yourself and enjoy the moment. And usually, and then also, believe it or not, like some of my teachers were like, work out. Because it does that for me. That really does work. It like totally clears my head, or like going on walks in nature and stuff, especially. That is just like, nature is my therapy, like hardcore. So question number 8. What are your most memorable moments that you've had since starting your art journey?
So I would say one of the first ones that comes to mind was putting on my senior show. So normally at my school, when it came to our seniors graduating, like the semester before they graduate or something, they put on a senior show. And so usually that is involving like maybe, 10 artists together in the gallery space. And so they have to, separate it, and then they put them up, like their work up. For me, because of the awkwardness of the timing for me, because I transferred in and needing a certain amount of credits and stuff in order to graduate, all that stuff, I ended up being the only senior graduating for that time frame. So I had the whole entire gallery to set up, to get ready, to hang all my work. I had a little bit of help from some, teachers and like the gallery staff, just briefly, mainly just to like, I can't move this wall by myself. I need somebody to help me push it. It was mostly stuff like that. Or like a little bit of help designing like the flyers to pass out to, advertise it. But everything else I did myself. I built my own frames. I put together my own frames. I spackled walls. I painted over the walls to make them look nice. But that one is a big one because, again, that's usually not an experience that most of the seniors would ever have, is putting on a gallery show by themselves. So that was a big one for me.
That's a feat right there. Because I bet you they don't even realize like all the work that goes into the behind, like making it look right.
Yeah. So that one is a big one that comes to mind. I would say doing a book cover is a big one for sure of like the recent years.
It's a good one too.
I don't know. Those are mainly the two that come to mind right now. I mean, also just like for example, last year, a goal of mine was like, I started doing tabling at events locally in 2023. I did 4 that year. So my goal for 2024 was to do at least 5. I ended up doing 10. So that one is another one that I would say is a nice like little tick off my experience of doing that, because that was the first time I've really gotten into this. So doing 10 of them was a good milestone for me.
So question number 9, do you have a unique process or ritual you perform before starting work on a new piece?
So honestly, I don't really think I do. I think it would be fun to try to like add in a little bit more of like a ritual to it. I mean, I would say it just depends on what I'm doing, but usually like setting up my space, just like filling up my water cups, spraying my, pans. I don't know if that's really a specific ritual to me. It's probably what everybody does.
What about mentally?
Mentally, I'd say the biggest thing that helps me mentally when it starts to try to work on something is usually having some sort of noise involved. So usually I'm either listening to music or I'm listening to like podcast stuff or videos on YouTube. I don't know, just having like some outside noise just helps me to get into focus, because sometimes I don't even, if it's music, half the time I don't even realize what I'm listening to at that point. When it's like a video or a podcast thing, I do still kind of like tune into it, but having that other thing just helps me to focus a little bit more when I'm working.
Because a lot of people can't handle it.
It really just depends. Everybody has a different thing. I would say that's my thing, is like
So
usually
you like background noise. Like,
Yeah.
it's like almost like maybe a comfort thing, maybe, or something.
maybe it usually helps. I usually always have, like, even when I was in school, I would have like,
Comment below, like, what you do if you're in the arts, like what you do, like if you're ritual. I'm curious as to what other people, I'm like super curious about that. Like, what do you guys do? Like for your work, do you have a ritual or something that you sit down and like when you're getting in the frame of mind before you're about to do something, like, what do you guys do? I'm curious.
probably part of why I don't have like any specific, like anything more than that is just because most of the time I try to draw very like every day, and usually I have like, so that's a weird thing for me. Like, I guess I usually can't leave the house most of the time without bringing a sketchbook with me. Now I've gotten to the habit.
No, that's a good thing to do.
Even though I
They
never
told us
like
to do that in school.
half the time I never even touch it if I'm going out, but there's just something about it that usually is like a comfort thing, and I just like
Just in case.
exactly. It's just the just in case.
Gotcha. Okay, so to close this out, this is a good one too. What advice or tips do you have for anyone out there who is considering a career as an artist?
So first thing I would say, again, especially if you're like, okay, I'm starting with going to school or something. Again, you're going, especially if you're somebody who like, oh, I really like the anime style or this particular illustration style that's like my style, or I'm trying to develop that style more. You're going, especially with like art teachers or critics or whatever, you're going to hit that where they're going to tell you not to draw that, like to various different degrees, where it's like, no, you need to focus on this life drawing. You need to draw these fruits in this basket or whatever. Mm-hmm. Don't fight that. I've seen it a lot through like my experience just throughout years, especially on the internet and stuff, with people complaining about that, where it's like, yes, some people are going to be assholes and talk shit about what your style or anime or whatever. Tune that stuff out, but don't tune it out so much that you don't listen to some of the advice that they try to give you, because there is merit in some of the stuff they're probably trying to tell you. So, and it's only
if you can't take criticism, you're in the wrong business.
That's
baby.
the biggest thing. That's another thing. Like whether you're in school or as like selling your stuff, you're gonna get critiqued, and not when you want to be told it. Again, there's a time and a place. A lot of times people don't respect the space that it's happening in.
And there's a difference between constructive criticism and just people being jerks criticism.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the jerks, they'll just be saying something really rude and they don't give a solution or something. Whereas someone who is giving constructive criticisms, which is what your teacher should be doing.
A good teacher should be doing.
Is like they question you about why you made that choice. And then they'll be, well, what do you think if you did this instead? Critical thinking, folks. This is something people really need to have these days. They don't.
There's a particular piece that I was doing in my printmaking class. This was when I was doing like my etching class. And I had this piece that was based around, we had a live model, she was set up, we were all kind of working from that piece. And so I started inventing little things in there. And initially, so I had like a TR3B in the window, and then I had actually put little aliens, like little grays in it. And that was the one piece where really my professor was like, these aren't really working. Like they're not really adding. It was very funny because, and this has been kind of my experience, and this is another thing to keep in mind.
I thought it was awesome.
So especially when it comes to like, okay, my teacher or this person is saying this, but wait until you have like a larger crowd kind of critique something, because, or have see their reaction for it. Because, for example, with that print, and this is the lovely thing about printmaking, was like, I could make a couple prints with the aliens in it and save that, but then I eventually like, okay, let me listen and take the critique, let me remove those, but I did keep the little spaceship, and it worked. Like it, he had a point. Mm-hmm. But I did keep the ones with the aliens, and I did show the ones with the aliens to my other classmates, and they all liked it because they thought it was, fun. Yeah. And even at one of my other little like class gallery shows that we did, we all had like a selection of different work that we hung up. And one of the pieces, like I had like the printmaking that looked like the school, kind of like, your traditional stuff. And then I had actually a piece from one of my sketchbooks that was one of my original characters that I had painted. And I had framed it, I hung it up, and it actually, like everybody who came in the crowd, the the masses who came to view it, they loved that piece. I even had my picture taken with that piece and was put in the local newspaper. And I found that so validating because it was like, oh, that's my kooky, weird little style, my little character. And people really liked that. So again, you need to, when it comes to the schooling part, you have an open mind of like, okay, you know what you like, you know what you want to do, but don't poo-poo, even though somebody else might be poo-poo on your stuff, their advice that they might have.
Yes.
Because it might be beneficial to you in the long run.
Yep.
As far as beyond that, don't let everything become a numbers game, especially if social media has become a very helpful tool for artists to become independent artists to sell their stuff, but don't get sucked into the algorithm mania. Also, again, be prepared for random people on the internet to say weird stuff about your work when you post it, or be critical.
That's with everybody who produces anything on
Yes.
social media, pretty much. Yes.
If you're trying to get into like local markets or conventions, be prepared for rejection with that. Also, make sure that you understand the laws in your area for what you're doing. Research that, learn marketing, learn business skills, even if they're really basic, but it will help you in the long run. You need to understand what it is you want to do with it. And yeah, I think that's
One of the tips that they gave us in school was learn all the rules and follow the rules, but then like once you reach a point, like, and you've learned and you have that holistic background and you've touched on different styles and different things, like, learn the rules, but then, follow the rules, but then break them. Like once you reach a certain point, you have to be true to yourself. No matter what, when you're an artist of any kind, you find the most success and happiness when you are your honest, authentic self. You're not gonna, you can't change just because somebody makes a comment and says, well, I would like it better if you did this or whatever. You can't listen to that. You have to listen to your gut instincts always. Your intuition is so incredibly important to listen to and follow it. Follow your heart when it comes to this kind of thing. You want to listen to constructive criticism for sure, and take it into account, but always remain true to yourself. In the end, you always have to do that.
Especially if you're somebody who wants to do freelance and you're going to work with clients,
Yeah.
you have to be prepared for them not to like the first thing that you probably present to them, to have requests and have changes within reason. That's why it's always good to have kind of like a framework for how many revisions are they going to make.
With this, she presented, I was like, wow, many ideas that were really cool.
Probably almost, if not 10 different thumbnail ideas and concepts.
We went with this, so because everybody who it wasn't just me who was looking at it. There were multiple people who were looking at it, helping to decide, and everyone really liked this. And it the way it looked, the whole setting, it's very powerful. I've watched the reaction of people when they look at the book cover, like when, she was doing an event and stuff, she had books with her and I was there and I was watching what people would do and the differences between men when they would look at it versus women. It was very, very interesting. I'm like, what's going on in their head? You could tell what was going on in people's heads. But it is it sucks you in and it makes you look, and, I really liked it. So.
And conveniently, one of the other thumbnail concepts that I presented is also what's going to become book 2 cover.
Oh my God, it's
which is
great.
going to be very exciting. I've already started tinkering with it and working on it. The other thing I haven't really mentioned is that, again, when I've talked about my experience stuff, obviously I have a stronger background in my traditional artwork. But again, probably in 2023, I started doing and experimenting with digital artwork, specifically using Clip Studio Paint. I chose that because, again, I eventually would like to do some comic work and stuff, and that is a helpful program that a lot of people use for creating their digital comics. As most comics nowadays are done digitally, and there's also a very strong sphere for people to do web comics and the like. So Clip Studio Paint was kind of designed with that in mind. Even a little bit of animation possibilities for some
the
people.
other one besides Clip Studio?
A lot of people use Procreate.
Yes, that's what I have.
Especially for because you can have it on the iPad. There's a lot of brushes. A lot of people make
There's
custom
so
brushes.
much to learn. It's I get anxiety.
And they've also just released animation capabilities.
Yeah.
So that's I would say that's one of the big ones. Obviously, more traditional ones that people have used in the past, even though they're not designed necessarily with artists in mind are things like Photoshop. You know, Adobe Illustrator is more geared towards that, but it's more of a vector art sphere of things. A long time ago, I attempted to do that and could not wrap my brain around it, unfortunately, because again, my traditional background of brain of drawing is very much like that. Like, I'm drawing on paper. I can't, you know, Control Z this stuff or whatnot. So like, it did take time to start to get more used to using, and I still am learning how to use these digital tools, but Clip Studio Paint was the one I liked the most because it's not sponsored or anything, but it had more friendliness to like a traditional artist, but also I recognized enough of the tools from using Photoshop that it's like, okay, I kind of already know how to use this, because Photoshop's just hard to use for like drawing because it's not designed with that in mind, but a lot of people use it. So yeah, I used the digital means. I did draw some stuff like traditionally, like to get my ideas out there, but then I went to digital means to finalize everything.
Okay, well, that's it. We hope you guys enjoyed this and you found it useful and helpful, especially if you are a creative yourself, artist, or if you're wondering like what it takes, you know, and how much work goes into it. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss a video from me. And thank you guys for joining us, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.